Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Mr. Wiz here. So we have been working our way through Unity. We've learned about how to create 3D objects. We learned how to make prefabs recently. We built this little building here and we added some textures. We learned how to make materials that look realistic. We also have learned how to make materials that are just colors. We've learned how to change their shininess and metalness. We've learned all sorts of stuff about building objects, building buildings. We also, in the last video, learned about the colliders and about rigid body to add gravity, to add physics to our games. We learned about bouncing, so I had the ball bouncing. So right now, this is the program that I have based on what we did yesterday. What we're going to do next is we're going to basically work on building a scene. So we've built objects, we've built buildings. Let's build a world. Let's build a scene to put these things in. Before we do that, I'd have a couple small things I'm going to do to this program real quick. I did already make a prefab for the building, but I've changed it since then. I've added textures to it and things that weren't in the original prefab. So I am going to update that. Before I create this new prefab, I noticed my stairs. I'm trying to go for realism, right? But if you look at my stairs, you're going to notice they're not super realistic because I'm using the same texture on every step. And you can kind of see these streaks, right? Where the texture lines up in a weird way. So what I'm going to do a little sneaky little trick here real quick. I could grab more marble textures, make more materials, and give each step its own texture, but that's going to take a lot of time. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate the steps 90 degrees. Different ones, different amounts, right? So for this one, I'll leave it at 0. So I'm rotating the Y is what I'm rotating, rotation Y. I'll leave the first step at 0. Second step, let's do 90. And you can see already it doesn't quite line up with the others now. The next one, we'll do 180. The next one, I'll do 270. So by rotating it in variations of 90 degrees, it still lines up correctly, but it means the texture isn't facing the same direction. So the texture for one of them is facing this way, for another one it's facing this way, for another one it's going to be facing that way, and for the other one it's facing that way, right? So I can do basically 4 rotations, 0, 90, 180, and 270, which are all just variations of 90. So for this one, I'll leave this one at 0 again, and I'm just going to do the same thing. So we'll do 90. Now you don't have to do this for yours, but I do think it makes the steps look better. What did I do on the last one? For the last one I did 180. Okay, so I'll do this one at 270. And we'll leave this one at 0, and then I'll do this one up here at 90 again. All right, cool. So now my steps don't all look exactly the same. I don't have those weird streaks that are going down it like I did before, right? So now it's still not perfect because every 4th step is identical. So this one right here is that the same as that one, and it's got the same as that one, right? But it's not something you're going to notice right away as the player. Okay, so I'm ready to save this new textured version of my building. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this into my prefab folder. Remember, my prefab folder is in my assets. And we're going to drag it in here. And I can choose to either make it an original prefab or a prefab variant because I do have another prefab that it's based on, right? So I'm just going to make it a variant. That way, if I decided to use other buildings and put other textures on them, I can. But this one has a texture and the other one does not. That's the only difference between these two buildings. Okay, so I'm ready to create my new program. I'm going to create a new program that I'm going to start building a world in. But I would like the stuff that I made in this program to carry over into the new one because I worked hard on these things. Oh, you know what else? I'm going to save the basketball as a prefab as well. Basketball. Let's put that in the prefab folder too. There we go. Okay, so I've made all these things in this program, and I would like my new program to have access to them. I would like to still be able to use these in this world that I'm about to create. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to export these files. So if you go to Assets up here in the top left corner, you have options like Import New Asset, which is how we got things like materials and pictures from the internet, right? But we also have this one here that says Export Package. I'm going to click Export Package. Now it's looking at the things that I have, and it's offering for me to export them. Right now, it's only focused on the basketball stuff. Did I do something wrong? Let's close this. Oh, that's because basketball is selected. Okay, oops, my bad. So I don't want to just export the basketball. I want to export everything. So I unselected basketball. Let's try this again. Edits, export package. There we go. So here's all the stuff that's in my program. So here's all the materials that I have in my material folder, and also the textures that I've downloaded. The physics textures in here, all the stuff in my material folder is right here. I have all the stuff in my prefab folder right here. Then I have the 2 scenes that I've been working on. For this package that I'm exporting, I don't want to export the scenes because I don't care about the scenes. I really only care about the things that I made. So I'm going to uncheck the scene box. When you're exporting content, you can select what you want to export and what you don't want to export. So I'm just going to be exporting the materials and the prefabs. I don't care about everything else. What do you think would happen if I exported the prefabs but not the materials? Remember, my prefabs use these materials. So if I don't export the materials and the prefabs together, then when I get my prefabs in another program, they're not going to look this way because they're not going to have the textures, they're not going to have the materials on them that I specifically built for them, right? So you really want to make sure you're getting the materials and the prefab. All right, so I have my content saved. I decided to call my package Foundations Prefabs because that's what's in them. And now I'm going to go ahead and open up a new program. So I'm going to create a new project. I'm using the 2022 version, but you can use whatever version you want to. For what I'm doing today, for what I'm showing you, really anything after 2020 should have these things in them. So I'm going to do a 3D core project. And what do I want to call this one? Let's call it My World. All right, so I'm creating a project called My World because I'm creating a scene. I'm creating a world, not just objects anymore. I'm going with a bigger vision. Now, how big is my world going to be? Realistically, not giant, because this is my first one that we're doing for this class, right? So we'll start small, but we can always go bigger from there. While I'm waiting for my program to finish getting created, let's talk about some of the things you're going to want to do if you're following along with me. So in the Unity Asset Store, there's several things you're probably going to want to download for today. We are going to build a world for a player to move around in, which means the player is going to need some controls. Rather than doing person controls, we're going to do car controller, or at least that's what I'm going to do. You can do your own thing, I guess, if you want to. But let's look at the free car controllers. So I'm going to download this one right here because it's pretty highly rated, 81 5 stars. That's pretty good, right? I have used this one in the past, but I didn't love it. And honestly, you see 3 stars there, so I guess my experience reflects on other people's. But we're going to download this one, and that will give the player the ability to drive around inside this world we're going to create. So this is going to be important for this lesson. Now, if by the time you watch this video, this is no longer in here, I'm sure you can find some other car controllers that you can use. Sometimes the Unity Asset Store does change what becomes available in the store, right? Other things you're going to want to need for today, we are looking at terrains. So we're going to do a search for terrain textures. Once again, I'm going to switch this to free. And there are a lot of things here. I think I'm going to use this one because once again, it seems to be pretty highly rated. So I'll be using this one. But if there's something else you'd rather use, that is up to you. I am going to show you today how to build terrains and have a lot of fun doing that. Let's see, what else should we do a search for? Maybe trees. If you're going to do an outside world, you might want to download some free packages like this. Actually, this one's pretty cool. I'll probably download this one. It's got rocks, trees, terrain. So yeah, some pretty cool stuff there. So think about what you want your world to be. Now, obviously, I'm going with an outdoor scene here. You might decide to go with more of a city scene. If you decide to do that, you can always do searches for things relating to the city. So you've got some fun stuff here you can play around with. So yeah, have fun. Find some stuff that you think looks cool. We're looking for decorations. Don't forget also about objects that might be in your game, right? So let's go to 3D. Let's do props, and let's download some free 3D props as well. So we got boulders. We got some crazy stuff there. Sports balls. Ooh, street props. That one looks promising. I'll probably download that one. And I can use that with my car. Have some things to run into. Some medieval ones. Wouldn't really fit for cars, but you get the idea. So yeah, while you're waiting for your program to finish uploading, you can go ahead and do a little shopping on the asset store. Find some stuff that you think you're going to need. As I mentioned, you will need a controller for the player. I'm using the car controller because I'm familiar with it, right? But yeah, you'll need a controller for the player. You'll need to do a search for some terrains, as we mentioned. Terrain texture. So definitely download some of those. And then, yeah, pause this video, do a little shopping, think about what you want your world to look like, and then come back and we'll start building some stuff, right? Okay, I'm back. I've got my new world here. It finished uploading. So once again, I'm using the 2022 version, but depending on which version you use, it will probably be very similar to this. Remember, you can change the layout if you don't like this layout. You've got your other layouts up there you can choose from. Okay. So right now, it took me to my sample scene where I have the main camera and the directional light, and that's all I have. Remember, I talked about this before. All scenes start with these basics. Before we start downloading all the stuff that we purchased in the asset store, let's go ahead and import the thing that we are bringing over from our last program. So we're going to go to Assets, and this time we're going to choose Import Package, Custom Package. Once you select this, all you need to do is go find that package that you saved, right? So import package, custom package, go find the one you saved, and then we'll put it in your program. All right, once I found it and selected it, this is giving me the option of choosing what I want to download. I'm going to download everything from here, but if there was anything I didn't want, I could uncheck it. So if I didn't care about the basketball prefab, I could turn that off, so on and so forth. But I'm going to go ahead and import all of my prefabs and all of my materials from my last program. And there we go. And now I've got my 3 folders just like I'd had before. And if I open up my prefabs, these are my prefabs, the trees that I made, the building that I made, the basketball that I made. The images haven't updated yet. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time before the images update. In materials, I've got the materials that I've made and all that jazz. So I am ready to start building my world. First things first, before I should put anything anywhere, I need a floor for my world because my world doesn't have a floor. In fact, my world has nothing but a camera and some sunlight. So, how do you want to put the floor in your world? There are 2 different ways you could possibly do this. You could right-click over here in the hierarchy, go to 3D Object, go to Plane, and use the plane as the floor in your world. When I first started coding Unity, this is what I did, right? And then I would just decide how big I wanted it to be. So if I was making a large world, I might do 1,000, sometimes in the X and the Z direction. The Y direction does not matter. Why do you think the Y direction does not matter for your plane? Because planes are 2-dimensional, right? Planes are flat. They are 2-dimensional objects. So they do not matter in that aspect. Okay. So if I decided to use this plane, then all I need to do is put a material on there that I could make for it. So here's a material that I've made. I don't think I made this on camera. But I made this material called dirt, and it's just using this dirt picture right here. And I'm layering it, tiling it 10 times in the X direction and 8 times in the Y direction. Since this is so big, I probably need to tile it more than that. Remember, tiling is to keep it from getting stretched out, because if it was 1-1, look at how stretched that image is. That looks terrible, right? So the bigger your plane is, the more you're probably going to have to tile. So I may have to tile as much as 100 times. Just to keep it from looking bad. So now when I get up near the surface, it actually looks pretty good at the surface. Because I tiled it so many times, right? So depending on how big your plane is, you might need to change the tiling of your texture for your floor. Now remember I said there's 2 different ways you could do this. So this is definitely one way. Let's pause on the second way for now. And I'm going to go ahead and start downloading some of those things that I purchased in the asset store, right? I keep saying purchased. They were free, but you know what I mean. All right, Windows. If you go to Windows and you go to your package manager, up here where it says in project, I'm going to switch that over to my assets. Anything I've ever downloaded from the asset store will appear on this list. And it is a big list for me because I've downloaded a lot of things in the asset store over time. Good news is I can also do a search right here. So what I'm looking for is that car controller that we downloaded. So I'm just going to do a search for car. And here's all the different things I've ever downloaded having to do with cars. And that is not the one I want. That's the one I told you guys was not that great. This is the one I'm looking for. Okay, so now I'm going to click. I've already downloaded it before, which is why it says re-download. I'm just going to go ahead and click import. And of course, I can choose to keep all this or delete anything. We are going to keep it all for now. Remember, when you're downloading things from the asset store, if a box pops up that talks about changing the settings, saying you have to reboot, blah, 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 just say no, right? Because some things that come in the asset store are made for very specific types of programs. And if you go changing your settings, you may end up breaking your game that you're making, right? I always recommend not changing settings once you've started building something. If you're going to do any settings changing, it needs to happen near the beginning of the program, not halfway through, right? You don't want to lose your work. Okay, so I've just downloaded that. So in my asset folder, I've got a new section that says car controller. And if I go to my all prefabs, ooh, I don't see a car in here. Oh, there it is, the one called Prometheus. So I'm going to go ahead and drag Prometheus onto the scene. There he is. I'm going to zoom in with the F key on my keyboard. Boom, boom. So this is the car that I just downloaded. Okay, so how do I get this car to drive? You ready? This is where we start getting fun with it. Right now, there is a camera in my world. The camera is nowhere near the car. The camera is all the way over there. And if I go to play my game, I can't see the car anywhere. I have no idea what I'm doing, right? I want my camera to follow my car. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is I want my camera to be attached to my car. So if my car moves somewhere, the camera should move with it. You guys see where I'm going with this? How am I going to attach the camera to the car? By making it a child in a parent-child relationship. So I'm going to take the camera, I'm going to drag it and drop it into where it says Prometheus, because that's the name of my car. And now the camera is attached to the car. Does it start working yet? No, it does not. It moves, but I still don't see the car. All right. So I need to set the camera's position now and rotation so it's facing the car the way I want it to. So right now my camera has this weird position here. I'm just going to reset that to 0, 0. Okay, and I can see a little screen here. Right now I'm looking at the wheels of my car because I put the camera basically in the middle of the car. So now I'm going to use the basic skills that I have to change its position and change its rotation. So it really depends now on what do I want the player's view to look like. I could do this right here. That's actually not bad, kind of an over-the-shoulder view of the car. I could have it a little bit lower, you can see the taillights, but then I can't really see what I'm driving into. I don't like that. For a car game, it's good to be able to see where you're going. So probably having it a little bit higher would be a good idea. I could rotate it so it's facing down a little bit. I could do something like that, right? I have to decide what looks good for me. All right, so let's try that. I kind of like that view, so I'm going to try it. Oh yeah, I forgot. For this car controller, you don't use the arrow keys, you use WASD. Depending on which one you downloaded, it might be different. So now I've got a view that I can see basically where I'm driving, right? I'm driving around, I'm looking straight ahead of me. Not bad. I still don't love this view, so I might change it. Maybe bring it down a little bit. You guys go ahead and decide what view you like the most. Remember, you can change its position and you can change its rotation. You could even, if you felt like it, go for like a first-person driving view. Let me change the rotation back to 0 and set it like it's in the driver's seat, right? So you could possibly do something like this if you wanted to. And now you're looking down the hood of the car. So you don't see the whole car, you just see the front of it, right? It's really up to you. So you decide where you want to put the camera. As long as it moves when the car moves, that's the important part, right? So I attached it as a child of the car, and then I set its position and rotation so that I could see what, where I'm going when I'm driving. So We've got a camera view. We've got the car view. Right now, we're using this dirt. How realistic does that dirt look up close, I wonder? Still looks really massive. So I might need to increase the tiling some more than what I was originally doing. I didn't realize how big of a world I actually made. I made a massive world here. All right, but before I do that, remember I did say there was 2 different ways you could do the floor. So what if you decided not to go the plane route? I'm going to go ahead and delete my plane. And we're going to do something else instead. I'm going to right-click and go to 3D Object. And I'm going to scroll down here towards the bottom to where it says Terrain. So this is a terrain. Still pretty big. Not quite as big as what I had a second ago, but still pretty big. So the cool thing about terrains is they work really good if you're doing an outdoor scene where you might have mountains or hills or valleys, right? If you're building a world in a flat plain, you don't really need terrains, in my opinion. But it's really helpful for hills and things of that nature. So let's look at the inspector window and what we can do with this terrain. So the first block here where it says terrain, you've got some different brush types. The first one says to create neighbor terrains. So if you wanted to make your terrain bigger than it originally is, you can use this brush and basically click and add more squares to the terrain. So there I just made it 4 times as big. And I kind of like that, so I'll leave it there. Okay, so that was the first one. Pretty easy to do. Just use the first tool and click where you want the new terrains to go. All right, the second one. This is where things start getting kind of fun and interesting. The second one here is what allows us to start to draw our hills, our mountains, our valleys. So we've got some different options. We have paint holes. I would not recommend using that one right off the bat. It's kind of weird. Paint texture is going to be important. So we should probably do that one first. So let's talk about paint texture. Right now, we don't have a terrain texture. Now, I know you're probably going to try to put your materials that you've made on the terrain, but what you'll find is that they don't work. You can't drag and drop them onto the terrain. It's a different type of material. Building terrain materials can be kind of a pain. So what we're going to do is we're going to download them. Remember I told you to do a search for terrain textures? Let's go ahead and download them. So I'm going to go download the ones that I had searched for earlier. Terrain texture free pack. This is the one that I got. So I've already downloaded it before, which is why it says re-download. I'm going to go ahead and import, and I'm going to import the whole thing. Boom, boom, boom. Takes just a moment while it's grabbing these different grasses and dirts and gravels, and this will be a pretty good one, I feel like. It was rated pretty highly, so we'll take a look. All right, it's finished. So now let's go back to the terrain. I'm going to click on terrain. Oh, by the way, you'll notice in the hierarchy, when I added those other terrains, it actually created them as separate objects. So just something to keep in mind, right? Okay, so right now I have paint texture selected. So we're looking at the second paint tool. We're doing the one that says paint texture. So down here where it says terrain layers, we need to click edit terrain layers. And we're going to add a layer. So please make sure you're following along with me for this part. We have the tool selected. We're in paint texture. We went to terrain layers, edit terrain layers, add layer. The first layer that we're going to choose will be the base layer. So this will be what most of the ground looks like unless we change it, right? So these are the textures that I have in the pack I downloaded. I got 2 grass ones. I got some gravel ones. So I want my world to mostly look grassy. So I'm going to go with this one. And I'm going to go ahead and select it. And now it turned everything to that grass texture. And in fact, let's do the same thing to the other 4. We're going to add the layer, paint it, add the layer, paint it. Oh, I forgot to finish adding it. I wonder if maybe I should have created my terrain before creating the other ones. Maybe that would have helped. Where's the button I'm looking for? There it is. That one. Boom. Add layer. Boom. Boom. Okay. So we've got our grass textures in place. In fact, let's just go ahead and test it out real quick. Let's drive around in it, see what it looks like. There we go. So I've got my grassy worlds that I'm able to drive around in. I'm still not convinced it's the best camera angle for me. I might change it later. But yeah, got some grass. Looks pretty good. Got a pretty big world here. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, so let's add a new layer. I'm going to go back to Edit Terrain Layers. Oh, here, hold on. Let's do the one I'm sitting on. I'm going to add a new layer. And this one, I'm going to use one of these gravel bits. Let's use this one right here. Here's how I use it. You'll see now in my terrain layers, I have two terrain layers, the grass and the one that I just added. My world hasn't changed at all yet. What I do is I select this one, and then I can go up to, can I shrink that? There we go. Where it says brushes. There are different kinds of brushes. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see it. This one I don't love because it's a perfect circle, and if you're looking at the real world, perfect circles pretty much never happen. So I don't love that one, but this one has like a faded out circle, which is pretty decent. This is another kind of faded out circle. There's a bunch of them, and then there's some here that are kind of odd shapes, and that's to give you a more natural look, right? You've got all these odd shapes here of different things. And then once again, you got some weird shapes, which don't happen very much in nature. So I'm going to do one of these odd shaped ones. Let's do this one. And with my gravelly ground selected, I have down here brush size and opacity. So remember, opacity means how much you can see through something, right? So basically, right now my brush size is 23, my opacity is 50. If I click right here, I'm just going to click one time. Doesn't look like I did much, but I created a little bit of gravel texture right there. Barely noticeable, because the opacity is pretty low. Let's drive up to it. So yeah, the ground's a little bit different right there. Barely noticeable. But keep in mind, I only clicked once. If I was to hold the button down, it becomes a little bit more noticeable. Let's check it out. There we go. So now I've got a spot in the ground that definitely looks different than the rest of the dirt there. And because this is a paint tool, I can literally just paint like that. So I can grab it and I can paint wherever I want this gravelly dirt to go. Right? Pretty cool. And again, I can change the brush size and I can change the opacity. So I could do less over here. Kind of looks like maybe a wild dirt road, very poorly drawn, but there it is. Let's check it out in first-person view. I like how the light reflects differently on it. You guys noticing that? The light reflects differently off this gravel than it does on the grass. Well designed. All right, we got a pretty cool little setup here so far. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. And you can do that with all of those textures, because this package actually came with 5 of them, right? So maybe I decide to do one as this other type of grass right here. I can click on that. I can grab, we'll do this one. And I'll put a little grass patch in the middle of the gravel there. And it's a different grass patch than the one I had before. So it should be right over here. And there it is with my new type of grass, right? So pretty cool. You can literally just paint the textures into your terrain, which gives you a lot of creative freedom. So that's the paint texture option. Now there's other ones too. Raise and lower terrain. This is pretty cool. You ready for this? Raise and lower terrain. So once again, you'll want to pick your brush type. For this one, I usually go with one of the smooth ones here, but you can go with an odd shape if you want to. So this is for literally creating mountains. So here's what I'm going to do. Notice the instructions tell you right here, left click to raise, hold shift and left click to lower. If I just do one little click, it barely does anything at all. I'll do one little click right there. Yeah, barely noticeable. If I drive up to it, I probably won't even see it. But if you click and hold, it will be noticeable. Oh, okay, I guess I do see it. There it is. You guys see this little mound? That was from one click. Oop, one click gave that little bump in the road. And there's another one right here from that one click. So it doesn't take much to create hills in your game. So you do have to be careful with that, because if you hold it, you can end up very quickly with some pretty big mountains if you're not careful. You definitely don't want to stay in one spot too long. So now I've got some cool hills in my game. Let's check them out. Whoa! And I fell through the floor. Okay. Apparently, I must have drawn too close to the car. Yeah, you see how the car is now inside the hill? My bad. All right, I'm going to move the car so it's not inside of the hill anymore. There we go. Notice it is above the ground a little bit, so that's why it sinks there. There we go. So now I can drive around with my WASD buttons, and this is actually looking kind of cool. I kind of like this. I got some crazy hills going on, but it gives me some fun driving. So I can try to jump off of some of these. Woohoo! Maybe I might need to edit my car controls later to give me some better speed so I can make some of those jumps. Get some air. All right, so going back to the terrain, we were looking at this tool, raise or lower. So yeah, if I wanted to lower any of these, I could hold down so like right here, it's a little too high maybe. I can hold down Shift and then click on it and lower it some. So that's not bad, right? Then there are other tools. There are the smooth tools. So some of these are kind of jagged. If I don't want them to be quite so jagged, I can smooth them out. Make them into softer edges, right? More like hills and less like volcanoes. So yeah, the smooth tool is actually pretty cool for kind of doing your finishing touches. If you've been building mountains, I recommend coming in with the smooth tool afterwards to smooth it out. Yeah, so some of these I don't have a lot of experience with. Set height is one I don't really know too much about. I am pretty new to terrains, so if you're in the comments and you know some of this stuff better than I do, please share your knowledge. Put it in the comments. Stamp terrain I've never used before. Mainly, like I said, I use this to paint texture, raise, lower, and smooth. Those are the main things I do. Paint holes is kind of weird, because what it does is it literally puts holes in your map. I don't know why anybody would want that. So if I clicked right here, I just put a hole in my map. That's not cool, right? So let's undo that. Edit, undo. All right, cool. So I would avoid the paint holes one. But yeah, paint texture is great. Raise, lower is great. Smooth is great. Let's go to the next brush. The next brush says paint trees. Now, when they're talking about trees, they're talking about specific prefabs, basically, right? So right now, there's no trees defined. If you go to edit trees, you can add trees from here. And they're basically just prefabs. So I could try doing my trees, but to be honest, I tried them earlier and they didn't work very well. So instead, I'm going to download some from the asset store like we were doing earlier, because there are definitely better things than what I made in the asset store. So let's go to this package right here. This one has mountain terrain, rocks, and trees. Pretty cool looking trees. I can use these in my world. So let's go ahead and import that. And I'm going to go ahead and import all of it. Looks like it's going to take just a moment here. I hope you're learning something new from this video. If you are learning something new, make sure you click that like button, right? Okay, so I've downloaded this new package, which does have some new stuff. So let's check it out. I'm going to go back to my terrain. I have paint trees. Although really it is kind of like planting them, isn't it? All right, so we're going to hit edit trees. We're going to hit add tree. I'm going to go to my game objects, and let's see if I can find the new tree that they gave me. All right, it looks like they gave me two different ones here. Pretty similar. So I'll go ahead and add that. So here is my tree. So how does the tree work? Okay, so I've got my tree selected. I can pick my brush size just like we're used to. So here's my brush, a little circle here. I pick my tree density. So this is how many trees do I want to grow inside of that little circle, right? 83 is an awful lot for this size brush. Now, if I had a bigger brush, then 83 wouldn't be so bad, right? But yeah, for this size brush, let's go a lot smaller grouping here. So let's try 26. All right, so I'm going to click. Boom. Do you guys see how easy that was? It just put a bunch of trees in that little spot of my map. And if I wanted trees in other areas, I could literally just draw them into my world. Let's go drive. Let's check it out. So here's the trees I just planted, or I just painted, right? Whole bunch of them, pretty cool. What happens if I drive into one of these trees, you might be wondering? Oh, I drove right through them. Ho-ho, okay. So that tells me that these trees are missing something important. What are they missing, class? If I can drive through them, what do those trees not have? Let's go find that tree. It's called tree_1. So it looks like it's this one right here. I'm going to double click on it to open it up. Oh, it does have a collider. But it didn't work. Why did my collider not work? Let's go back. Does my car have a collider? Yeah, it has a collider too. I can see it. So why did it not work when I ran into the trees? My enable collider is turned on. Let's try that again. If I drive forward, I should not be able to drive through these trees. But it's letting me. Somebody's collider is not working correctly. Alright, what was the other tree? There were two trees. What was the other one? The other one was also tree 01. Oh, I know what happened here, guys. We grabbed the wrong tree 01. One of these is a prefab, and one of them is just a mesh. We grabbed the wrong one. Alright, so let's fix this. Let's undo our tree. There it goes. Alright, so we are not going to use this tree. Instead, let's remove that tree and let's add the one that actually has the prefab right here. Add. Alright, we're going to put some of these in our world right here. Let's go run into them and make sure that we can't go through them. Ah, it's still... What? Come on! I thought we solved the problem. Alright, since I can't figure out why its collider's not working, I'm going to create a new collider for it. Let's see if that fixes it. Sometimes mesh colliders can just be buggy. I have seen this before. So I'm going to create a box collider for it. I'm going to turn off the mesh collider. And we're going to edit the box collider. To edit the box collider, you click on this button right here. And this allows us to kind of reshape it. So you'll notice that my box collider is really big. I don't need to worry about hitting this empty space. I really only need to worry about the trunk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these edges and I'm going to line it up so that the box collider kind of fits the trunk itself and not the rest of the tree. I'm not worried about the rest of the tree. I'm just worried about my car stopping when I hit the trunk. So I'm using Alt to change my perspective, and then I'm grabbing each of these sides, and I'm shrinking the collider so it only really covers the tree trunk itself. Alright, so I've made a box collider around the tree trunk. Box colliders, in my experience, do tend to work better than mesh colliders, so fingers crossed this fixes our problem. I do want to save it. Alright, let's try this again. So now these should all have box colliders on them, and it works! Haha! Yep, so that was our problem. Our problem was just that the mesh collider was being buggy. Okay. Yep. Cool. Alright, so I've got trees that'll stop me from driving around, and I can build a bunch of them, as I mentioned, with the tool. The paint tree tool. I can pick my brush size, I can pick my tree density, And I can paint these all over the map if I wanted to. But there's an easier way to get them all over the map. But before we do that, let me do one other thing. I don't want my only decoration to be trees. So even though this tool says paint trees, you can use it for more than trees. I'm going to click add, and I'm going to go to my game objects. So these are prefabs, right? So what if I also wanted to include some of these rocks in there? Now just a heads up, notice the symbol here, okay? Some of these are prefabs and some of these are models. The prefabs look like this. The models look like that. So only really add prefabs. Otherwise, you're going to have more problems with mesh colliders like we just did, right? So I'm going to add some of these rock prefabs. I did rock 1. Let's do rock 2. I don't need a lot of rocks. No, actually, I'm going to do rock 3. I like rock 3 better than rock 2. So I'll just do that. 1 tree and 2 rocks. Okay. So I can also paint rocks onto my world. So over here, or I've got this little hole over here, maybe I want to put some rocks in there. So let's do a higher density. And I'm just going to put a bunch of rocks. We'll use this rock in here. Boom. Now I can't see it because I'm zoomed out too far. But if I zoom in closer, I should be able to see the rocks that I just created. There they are. Right? Created quite a bunch of them. Oops, I didn't mean to push that button. I pushed the 2D button. My bad. Okay. There we go. So I got a bunch of rocks in there now. So you can do more than just trees, is what I'm trying to say, with the Paint Tree tool. There are other things you can also decorate your world with. Now, here's where I get really cool with it. Did you guys notice this button here that says Mass Place? That one's pretty cool. With the Mass Place, I can put them all over my world. Okay, so I'm going to do Mass Place. And we're going to place 10,000 objects in my world, and I'm going to keep the existing trees. Actually, no, let's not keep the existing ones. We're going to place them all with these 10,000. So place. Boom. All right, here's what I want you to notice. It didn't just place the first tree. It actually placed rocks as well. So it just decorated my world for me with trees and rocks. Let's go check it out. Hey! So even though I have a massive terrain here, I was able to put trees and rocks all over it. Oof, I'm bad at driving on these hills. But notice how cool that was and how easy that was. I didn't have to draw every single one. I didn't have to figure out where they all went. It just kind of scattered them around my map. Now, I think it only did that to this terrain. I don't think it did that to the other ones. So if the other ones, let's zoom over there real quick. Do they have trees and rocks as well? Doesn't look like they do. Yeah. So if I wanted to do mass on those two, I could. Right? And now my whole map should have trees and rocks all over the place. I picked some big rocks. Now, keep in mind what we learned about prefabs. If I decided after all doing all of this that these rocks were too big, I could go back to their original prefabs. I could edit them, and it would edit every single one of these rocks in my world. So, is there anything else I want to show you guys about this? This is becoming a pretty long video. We talked about planting trees. I'm not really worried about the grass one. Paint details. Terrain settings, I also don't really recommend playing around with. So let's just focus on these first three. As I mentioned, I am fairly new with terrain. So if I'm missing some things that you feel like I should really know about or my students should really know about, please put it in my comments. So we will stop this video here. I hope you learned something new. If you did, please click that like button. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. Now go decorate your world. Have fun.